I was at Panavision for many years. I was an executive at Panavision along the road. And eventually they were good enough to fire me. And so I had my life back because I would have stayed. You know, I was a senior executive and I made a lot of money and you get comfortable, you know, and people liked me. And I thought I would be the old guy who, whenever the visitors came to the factory, they'd say, Andy, why don't you take them for, and I had all the stories and I could, you know, that kind of stuff. And then they kicked me out. I said, oh, wow. You know?
Thanks.
And it turned out to be, sitting in the front row, right here is my wife, Darcy. For whom and without which, that's all we'll say. And every day we would sit out in the backyard. And the guy who fired me was a guy named John Sue. And every day we would say, God bless you, John Sue. because he gave me freedom. And I started to make pictures again, because I made pictures, but they were all business and, you know, that kind of stuff. And I did a project. I spent 7 months at the Pacific Design Center. I had total access, and I spent 7 months shooting there every day. And I had a gallery. I did shows there. It was cool. I shot architecture, and I shot people, and I kind of relearned that stuff a little. And then that was done. Am I getting it backwards, Darcy? Okay, she's my reality check. And then I was looking for another project, and I wandered into a Buddhist temple not far from our house. And I was suddenly struck by that you can always kind of feel the artist, you know, that there's always a double image particularly I think in sacred imagery. There's always the person they are trying to convey, and then what they bring to it that they can convey it with. And I started thinking about the way I think most people, that's not fair. It is not uncommon that you look at a statue, you find, you know, where the light is, you find an angle, whatever, and you shoot a picture of it. And I realized what I wanted to do was to make portraits of stone images, of plaster images. I wanted to find ways to see them that resonated with me emotionally and that I hoped might have been the artist's view when they were making them. And that project ended up being called 15,000 Buddhas, and I spent 2 years, 3 years, and I shot in Europe, and I shot in museums, and I shot in many cities in America. And wherever I went, that was the intention. So maybe that's the first time I really have that kind of an intention, was to make a portrait. And in order to make a portrait, I was really forced to sit still. And because I already told you who I am, sitting still was not the easiest thing, you know. But I learned to not pick up the camera. I learned to sit down in a room and really look at it. And then say, okay, what's it like over there? And then at a certain point, you know, I would feel it. And it's just totally about feeling. I would feel it, and I would pick up the camera, and maybe I would get up, and then I would start moving, and I would start shooting. And that was a revelation. That was just amazing.
Really different from any commercial work.
So among the people who are sitting here today are 2 cinematographers, 2 Hollywood, dare I say it, big shot cinematographers. And these guys have to size up a situation, and because I worked with them for years, I worked on a lot of movies. They have to size up a situation in 15 seconds while a director says one thing in their ear and the production manager says, no, we don't have time for that, you know. And
no, you can't have a crane.
No, God, why do you need a crane? There's a ladder in that closet.
And you don't get to go back if it's not right. It's like got to be right.
Do it right. Or at least when you see the daily, say, God, that's exactly what I wanted.
I know Andy Romanoff will give us a good deal on that crane.
That's right. There's 3 of them here. Yeah, and the difference between making a thing commercially, where you have to, where you have to make your decisions and live with your decisions. You polish them the best you can, but it's very, very rare that you can throw away your first decision and just sit there and say, no, I want to sit here for a while and feel what's going on. And
Like
then we'll
waiting
do
to
something.
be inspired?
Yes. Oh, that's what it is. Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Intention-wise, was this always going to be a little movie?
No,
No?
thank you. No, that's the other thing. I shot stills forever. I worked on movies forever. I shot a lot of really bad movies. And
Let's play some of those.
yeah. And then very slowly, as I started to amass a real body of work, because if you look at numbers, my work in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is 1,000 images, maybe not even 1,000 images, probably not. And now I have 200,000, and those 200,000, 90% are 15 years or younger. And so, I'm sorry, I lost the thread of why.
How did it become a film?
Oh, how did it become a film? Right.
Was it first a book? Was it first an exhibition?
So how I got into the film business was I started shooting in Chicago, and I got interested. I was a biker. I built motorcycles. That's what I cared about more than anything. But I started getting really interested in this photography stuff, and I wanted something wrong. I don't know what's wrong, and I concluded that what was wrong was they lacked motion. I didn't understand yet that they were still for a reason. and I called around, and there was a school in Chicago called Columbia College, and they had a class in motion pictures. And I called them and I said, I might be interested in coming and taking a class in motion pictures. And they said, well, we're not offering it this year, but the guy who teaches it is about to make a movie, and he might hire you as a PA. And so I called that guy's office, and he said, does nudity bother you? And I said, not as far as I know. And so the very first film I ever worked on was something called Boing, B-O-I-N-N-G. And it was a nudie. And suddenly I was learning how to make movies. And I was just so excited that, that I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then there's 100 detours, and I get in the movie business, and I shoot crappy movies, and then I find a piece of technology called the Luma crane, and I got involved in bringing it to America, and then I became the guy who taught a whole first generation how to run that thing, and I worked on every expensive movie in Hollywood for a few years. And then I had a bad drug problem, and those were related. And then other stuff happened, and then I ended up as an executive. And when I came back out, I thought what I wanted to do was to shoot stills. I wanted to go back to the simple, original thing. But I discovered something new as the number of pictures started to climb, and that was, one picture is not enough. I mean, that idea that comes from magazines and comes from 100 years ago, when every image is precious, and you need one image to sum up because the story is only 4 pictures long. We're past that. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. God knows I'm not saying that, and I'm in awe of people who can do that really well. But there's another way to look at it, and that is a kaleidoscope of images, that we can put the images together and tell a much bigger story. And that began to interest me a lot. So this one that we're looking at right now was the first time, and I couldn't edit, so I found somebody to edit, but we put this one together as part of I did a show of these sacred images in a large church in Los Angeles. And they hung 38 images or something up on the walls. It was amazing. As a photographer, it was a time of great, great pride. But almost as an afterthought, we made this video, and it was in a chapel, and it would run on the screen, and I saw people were crying. I saw people would sit down. We made it thinking that they would last, people would watch it for 2 or 3 minutes, and it ran 30, and people would sit down, and they would just meditate to it. I was so fascinated to learn that. I was so excited to see that, and I began to realize I might do more of that.